Did you know that the person we trust most can be the very one planning our destruction? I never imagined I would discover this in the worst possible way, through the innocent eyes of my own granddaughter. My name is Loretta Mae Washington. I'm 67 years old, and all my life I believed that family was sacred. I grew up in a house where a person's word was worth more than any contract, where a handshake sealed deals forever, and where the kitchen table was the center of everything that mattered. But on that cold November morning, when my granddaughter Jasmine whispered a secret that would make my world collapse, I learned that not every family deserves to be called one. I've lived alone since I lost my husband, Gerald, 15 years ago. Our house is in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Memphis, Tennessee. A red brick construction with a wooden porch that creaks underfoot, and a garden where I still plant the same roses that Gerald loved. The walls hold photographs of better times, when my 3 children were small and filled every room with laughter. Now, silence is the only permanent resident besides me, broken only by the tick-tock of the wall clock I inherited from my mother. My daughter Denise was always the most complex of the 3. Since childhood, she had that restless way about her, as if she was never fully present, always looking at some point beyond the horizon that only she could see. When she married Marcus, I thought she had found her safe harbor. Marcus was charming, well-spoken, always with a wide smile and sweet words. But Gerald, who had a sharp instinct for people, told me once, shortly before he died, "Loretta, that man has the eyes of someone counting money that isn't his." At the time, I thought it was just the natural jealousy of a protective father. How wrong I was. Jasmine was born 7 years ago, and it was as if God had sent a ray of sunshine to illuminate my increasingly dark days. That child with enormous eyes and rebellious curls was my joy, my reason to wake up smiling. I saw her on weekends, when Denise brought her to spend the afternoon with me, and those hours were the most precious moments of my week. We made cookies together. She helped me water the roses, and I combed her hair while telling family stories about great-grandmothers she never knew, about the struggles we faced and overcame. But in the last 6 months, something changed. Jasmine began to become too quiet. Her eyes lost that mischievous sparkle, and she stopped asking me endless questions as she used to. When I asked what was happening, she just squeezed her rag doll, an old doll named Ruby that I had sewn for her myself, and shook her head. "Everything's fine, Grandma," she would say in a voice so small I could barely hear it. But I knew everything wasn't fine. A grandmother always knows. It was on a Friday, November 13th, that my world began to crack. Denise showed up without warning, which was already strange, because she always called beforehand. It was almost 8 at night, and the temperature had already plummeted. I was in the kitchen preparing tea when I heard the insistent knocking at the door. I opened it and found Denise standing there, with Jasmine hidden behind her, clutching her mother's leg as if it were a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Mom, I need you to keep Jasmine tonight," said Denise without looking me in the eyes. Her face was pale, almost gray under the yellow light of the porch, and there was a tension in her shoulders I had never seen before. "Marcus and I have to sort out some urgent things." I wanted to ask what kind of urgent things happen on a Friday night, but the way Jasmine was trembling made me swallow my words. "Of course, dear. Jasmine is always welcome here, you know that." I extended my arms to my granddaughter, but she hesitated, looking at her mother as if asking permission. Denise crouched down and whispered something in Jasmine's ear that I couldn't hear completely, but I caught scattered words that froze me. "Don't tell. Secret. Trust me." When Denise stood up, her eyes finally met mine, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something there I had never seen in my daughter, something that looked like fear mixed with guilt. Then she turned her back and disappeared into the dark night, leaving only the echo of her hurried steps on the cracked concrete sidewalk. I took Jasmine inside. I prepared hot chocolate the way she liked it, with marshmallows and a pinch of cinnamon, and placed homemade cookies on a plate. But she barely touched the food. She sat at the kitchen table, hugging Ruby, staring at the steam rising from the mug as if she could read messages there. "Jasmine, my love, what's happening?" I sat beside her and took her small, cold hand. "You can tell me anything. You know that." She lifted her eyes to me, and in that moment, I saw tears beginning to form. "Grandma, Mommy said I can't tell." "Tell what, dear?" Her lower lip trembled. "About the basement." My heart gave a strange jump. "What basement, Jasmine?" The basement of our house. Her voice was almost inaudible now. Grandma, there's someone down there. I heard crying. Every night when everyone thinks I'm sleeping, I hear a voice crying and asking for help. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. I grabbed the back of the chair tightly, trying to process what I was hearing. Jasmine, are you sure? Couldn't it be a nightmare? She shook her head vehemently, the tears now flowing freely down her face. No, Grandma, I really hear it. And once, when Daddy was out and Mommy fell asleep on the sofa, I went down the stairs. The basement door was ajar, and I saw, she sobbed, squeezing Ruby so hard that her knuckles turned white. I saw a girl, Grandma, a girl about my age, chained up. She was dirty and thin, and when she saw me, she did this. Jasmine put her finger to her lips in the universal gesture of silence. Then I heard Mommy moving, and I ran back to my room. I couldn't breathe. My mind refused to accept what I was hearing. Denise? My daughter? Impossible. But Jasmine's eyes didn't lie. Children this age don't invent stories with so many details, don't demonstrate this kind of genuine terror. Jasmine, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. I held her face with both hands, looking directly into her eyes. You were right to tell me this. You were very, very brave. And Grandma is going to take care of everything. Do you hear me? Nobody is going to hurt you. She nodded, but continued trembling. I took her to the guest room, the one I always kept ready for her visits, with flowered sheets and the quilt that had belonged to my grandmother. I lay beside her until she fell asleep, stroking her curls and singing softly the same lullabies I sang to my children decades ago. But when her breathing finally calmed in sleep, I got up and went to the kitchen, my legs barely supporting me. I sat at the table where I had spent so many nights with Gerald, where we made so many important decisions about our family, and tried to think clearly. What Jasmine had described was serious, very serious. If it were true, if there really was a child being held captive in my daughter's house, then I was facing a crime I didn't even dare to fully name in my mind. But if it wasn't true, if it was some kind of misunderstanding, or a child's imagination, then I was about to destroy my own family with a terrible accusation. I looked at the phone hanging on the kitchen wall. Should I call the police immediately? But what would I say? That my 7-year-old granddaughter told me she heard crying in the basement? Would they take this seriously? Or would they think I was just a confused old woman, possibly senile, making up stories about her own family? Then I remembered something. 3 months ago, I had seen a news report on television about a missing girl in Memphis. Her name was Kayla Mitchell, a 6-year-old child who disappeared while playing in the yard of her house. I remember perfectly the desperate face of her mother on the screens, begging for any information. The police never found clues. The girl simply vanished, as if she had been swallowed by the earth. With trembling hands, I turned on my old computer, the one my youngest son, Thomas, had given me 2 Christmases ago and patiently taught me to use. It took what seemed like an eternity for the machine to wake up, and then I searched for news about Kayla Mitchell. I found dozens of articles. I studied every published photo, every detail about her: height, weight, birthmarks, eye color. My mind was working frantically, trying to connect dots that I didn't want to connect. Denise and Marcus had moved to that house about 4 months ago, an old house in a secluded area of the city with a basement. At the time, Denise said they got a great deal, that the previous owner was desperate to sell. I remember finding it strange because the house was too big for the 3 of them and was far from both their jobs. But Marcus insisted, said it was an investment. Now, sitting in the cold blue light of the computer screen, I was beginning to wonder if there was another reason for choosing that house specifically. An isolated basement, no neighbors close enough to hear screams. I spent the entire night awake, alternating between checking on sleeping Jasmine and doing online research. I discovered that there were other missing children in the Memphis area in the last 2 years, 5 in total, all girls, all between 5 and 8 years old. The police suspected a serial kidnapper, but never found anything concrete. The cases went cold, one after another, while shattered families held vigils and hung posters that wind and rain eventually destroyed. When the sun began to rise, painting the sky orange and pink through the kitchen window, I had made a decision. No matter how much it hurt, no matter if it ended up destroying my family, I couldn't ignore what Jasmine told me. If there was the slightest chance that a child was suffering, I had to act. But I knew I needed more than just Jasmine's word. I needed proof, and I knew exactly how to get it. At 8 in the morning, I called Denise. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sleepy and irritated. "Mom? What is it?" "Good morning, dear. Sorry to call early, but I wanted to know if you would mind if I kept Jasmine today. We could spend the day together, go to the park, make those cookies she loves." There was a pause. "Oh, I don't know, Mom. I should—" "Please, Denise." I put all the sweetness I could muster into my voice. "You know how rare opportunities are to spend time with my grandbaby. And you two can have the day off to sort out those urgent things you mentioned yesterday." Another pause. Longer. Then, "All right, but call me if there's any problem." "Of course, dear. Always." If you're following this story and wanting to know how all this ends, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what you would do in my place. It helps me continue sharing stories that need to be told. After I hung up, I went to check on Jasmine. She was awake, sitting on the bed hugging Ruby, her eyes still red and swollen from crying so much during the night. "Grandma," she said when she saw me, "sorry for telling Mommy's secret." I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her onto my lap. "Jasmine, listen. Some secrets shouldn't be kept. When a secret involves someone being hurt, then it's not really a secret. It's a lie. And you did nothing wrong by telling me. In fact, you may have saved a life. The life of the girl in the basement?" Her eyes widened with hope. "Maybe, my love. Maybe." We spent the day doing normal activities, or trying to. We baked cookies, although Jasmine barely tasted the dough. We watched her favorite cartoons, but she couldn't concentrate. All afternoon I watched her, noticing details I should have noticed before. The deep circles under her eyes, the way she flinched at every sudden sound, how she bit her nails until they were raw. My poor granddaughter had been living with this terror alone, with no one to tell, carrying a weight no child should carry. And I, absorbed in my own loneliness and routines, hadn't noticed that something was terribly wrong. When it started to get dark, Denise called saying she would come get Jasmine in an hour. This was my chance. "Jasmine," I said, kneeling to be at eye level with her, "I need you to be very brave now. I'm going to ask you something difficult." She nodded, squeezing Ruby. "Could you draw for me what you saw in the basement? It doesn't have to be perfect, just what you remember." Her hands began to tremble, but she nodded again. I gave her paper and colored pencils and watched as she drew with hesitant strokes. The result made me choke. She drew stairs going down, a dark room with a single hanging lamp, and in the corner, a small figure with chains on her wrists. The details were disturbingly specific to be invented. The position of the door, a small high window, even what looked like a pile of boxes in a corner. "Jasmine, is there anything else you remember? Any detail, no matter how small?" She frowned, thinking. "There was a bad smell, Grandma. Like when the trash stays too long without being thrown out. And the girl had a cut on her forehead here." She pointed to her own forehead, with dried blood. Every word was a stab in my heart. I photographed the drawing with my cell phone, the one Thomas had insisted I buy for emergencies. Well, this certainly qualified as an emergency. When Denise arrived to pick up Jasmine, I studied my daughter with new eyes. She was different, thinner, with deep dark circles and a nervousness contained in every movement. Her hands trembled slightly when she picked up Jasmine's bag. "Thanks for keeping her, Mom," she said without looking directly at me. "Always, dear." I hugged Jasmine firmly before she left, whispering in her ear, "Be strong, baby. Grandma's going to fix this." I watched their car disappear into the night, and then I did something I had never done before. I grabbed my keys and drove to Denise and Marcus's house. I didn't intend to go inside. Not that night. I just wanted to observe, check if there was anything at all that could confirm or deny Jasmine's story. The house was at the end of a poorly lit street, surrounded by tall trees that blocked the moonlight. I parked a few blocks away and walked, my heart pounding so loud I was sure the whole world could hear it. The living room lights were on. Through the window, I could see Marcus sitting on the sofa, drinking beer and watching television. Denise was in the kitchen, moving from one side to another like a ghost. Jasmine was nowhere in sight, probably already in her room. I circled the house silently, my feet on the wet grass muffling any sound. In the back, I found what I was looking for. A small high window at ground level, exactly as Jasmine had drawn. The basement window. I knelt in the wet grass, not caring about the dampness penetrating my pants, and waited. Seconds turned into minutes. Minutes turned into half an hour. I was about to give up when I heard it. A low, muffled sound. Crying. A child's crying. My entire body went cold. I pressed my ear against the cold, dirty glass of the window. The crying continued, interspersed with words I could barely distinguish. "Mommy, please, I want to go home." Tears began to stream down my face. Jasmine was telling the truth. Dear God, she was telling the truth. I was about to stand up when the basement light suddenly came on. I froze, my body pressed to the ground. Through the foggy window, I could see a figure descending the stairs. It was Marcus. He was holding something in his hand. A tray, perhaps. He approached something outside my angle of vision, and I heard his voice, hard and threatening. "Eat this and stay quiet. If I hear one more peep, you'll regret it." I couldn't see the response, but I heard renewed sobbing. Marcus turned and climbed the stairs again, turning off the light and leaving the basement in total darkness. I should have left there immediately, should have gone straight to the police, but my legs wouldn't move. I stayed there, frozen in the wet grass, trying to process what I had just witnessed. My son-in-law, the man I had welcomed into my family, the father of my granddaughter, was keeping a child prisoner in his basement. I don't know how long I stayed there. It could have been 5 minutes or 5 hours. When I finally managed to move, I was shaking so violently I could barely stand. I staggered back to my car and drove home on autopilot, my mind a whirlwind of horror and disbelief. At home, I locked all the doors and windows, something I rarely did. I sat on the living room sofa, still in my wet clothes dirty with grass, and tried to decide what to do. My mind screamed to call the police immediately, but something made me hesitate. Without concrete proof beyond what I heard, would they believe me? Or would they think I was a confused old woman, possibly with dementia, making up stories about her own family? And there was another fear, deeper and darker. If I reported Marcus and Denise and they couldn't find anything, if somehow they managed to hide the evidence, then I would have revealed my hand. They would know that I knew. And what would they do then? To Jasmine? To me? I spent another night without sleep, now haunted not just by Jasmine's story, but by what I myself had witnessed. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that soft crying, "Mommy, please, I want to go home." The next morning, Saturday, I made the call that would change everything, but not to the police, not yet. First, I called my son Thomas. Thomas, my youngest, worked as a private investigator in Nashville. If anyone could help me gather solid evidence before going to the authorities, it was him. "Thomas," I said when he answered, my voice trembling despite efforts to keep it steady, "I need your help, and I need you to trust me, no matter how insane what I'm going to say sounds." There was a pause. Then, "Mom, you're scaring me." "What happened?" I told him everything, every detail of what Jasmine told me, the drawing she made, what I witnessed the night before. Thomas listened to me in silence, without interrupting once. When I finished, another long silence followed. "Mom," he said finally, his voice carefully controlled, "are you absolutely sure of what you heard?" "I am, Thomas. I know how it sounds. I know it seems impossible. But I'm telling you, I saw Marcus enter that basement, and I heard a child crying. Mom, if this is true, and I'm not saying I don't believe you, but if it's true, then we're talking about something far beyond anything you can handle alone. You need to go to the police now." "I know, but I need proof first, Thomas. I need something concrete beyond the word of a 67-year-old woman and a 7-year-old child. Can you help me with that?" He sighed deeply. "I'll hit the road now. I'll be there in 3 hours. Meanwhile, Mom, promise me you won't go back to that house alone. Promise. I promise." But promises, I learned, are easy to make and hard to keep when a life is at stake. Thomas arrived shortly after noon, driving faster than he should have. He hugged me tight at the door, and I felt my son scan my face, looking for signs that I was having some kind of mental breakdown. But what he saw must have convinced him I was lucid, because his shoulders relaxed marginally. "Show me Jasmine's drawing," he said without ceremony. I showed him not just the drawing, but also the photos I had discreetly taken of the basement window with my cell phone. Although they were blurry and dark, I showed him the articles I had printed about Kayla Mitchell and the other missing girls. Thomas studied everything in silence for long minutes. Then he grabbed his laptop and started typing rapidly. "I'm going to check some things. Marcus's history, financial records, anything that might give us a clue." While he worked, I prepared coffee and sandwiches that neither of us ate. The tension in the kitchen was so thick, it could be cut with a knife. Every time Thomas's computer beeped with a new result, my heart jumped. "Mom," he said finally, turning the screen toward me. "Marcus Lee has a history. Nothing about kidnapping, but there are records of arrests when he was younger. Trespassing, theft, even an assault charge that was dropped. And look at this." He clicked on another file. "He has a sister, Vanessa Lee, who is currently serving time for drug trafficking and association with a child exploitation network." I felt my stomach turn. My God, there's more. Checking Marcus and Denise's financial records, there are regular deposits of significant amounts into their accounts, from a source I can't immediately trace. And look at the phone call history. He enlarged a screen full of numbers. Marcus has been in frequent contact with numbers registered to people with extensive criminal records. One of them, this one here, belongs to a man currently under federal investigation for human trafficking. Each word was a punch to the stomach. My daughter Denise was married to this man, lived with him, had a daughter with him, and either she was participating in his crimes or was a victim so frightened and manipulated that she couldn't get out. "Thomas, we need to get Jasmine out of that house," I said, my voice rising in panic. "Now, before something happens to her." "Calm down, Mom. If we go there now, we could make things worse. Marcus might do something drastic if he feels he's being cornered. We need a plan." But before we could formulate any plan, my phone rang. It was Denise. I answered with trembling hands. "Mom," her voice was strange, tense, and high-pitched. "Is Jasmine there with you?" My heart stopped. "What? No. Why would she be? She's not at home. We've looked everywhere. Her room is empty and the back door is open. Mom, I can't find my daughter." The phone almost slipped from my hand. "When did you last see her?" "About an hour ago. She was in her room playing." "Mom, where could she have gone?" My mind raced. Jasmine ran away, but where would a 7-year-old child run to? And why? Then I understood. With a cold horror spreading through my chest, I understood exactly what Jasmine had done. She had gone to free the girl in the basement. "Thomas, we need to get to that house now!" The words exploded from my mouth before I could think. I was already grabbing my purse, searching frantically for my car keys while my hands shook so violently I could barely grip anything. Thomas grabbed my shoulders firmly, forcing me to look at him. "Mom, listen to me. We can't just burst in there. If Marcus realizes we know, if he feels trapped, there's no telling what he might do. To Jasmine, to that other child, we need to be smart about this." "Smart?" I could hear my voice breaking, climbing toward hysteria. "My grandbaby is in that house right now, probably trying to save another child, and that monster is there too. We don't have time to be smart." But even as I said it, I knew Thomas was right. My heart was screaming at me to run, to drive as fast as I could to that house and tear it apart brick by brick if necessary. But my mind, the part of me that had raised 3 children and survived 67 years in this cruel world, knew that rushing in blindly could get everyone killed. Thomas was already on his phone, pacing the kitchen floor. "Yes, this is Thomas Washington, private investigator, license number 47829. I need to report a possible child abduction in progress and an endangered minor." He recited Denise and Marcus's address with mechanical precision. "The suspect is Marcus James Lee, white male, 6'2", approximately 190 pounds. There may be multiple children in danger at the residence. I'm en route to the location now with additional witness information." He hung up and looked at me. "They're dispatching units now. But Mom, we need to get there first. We need eyes on that house before the cavalry arrives, because if Marcus hears sirens..." He didn't need to finish. We both knew what could happen if Marcus heard police sirens approaching. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. We took Thomas's car, a dark sedan that wouldn't draw attention. The 15-minute drive to Denise's house felt like 15 hours. My mind kept creating horrible scenarios, each worse than the last. I saw Jasmine discovering the basement door locked. I saw her trying to break it open, making noise. I saw Marcus hearing her coming down the stairs, his face twisted with rage. I saw... "Stop it, Mom!" Thomas's voice cut through my spiral. "I can see what you're doing. Don't go there. Jasmine is smart. She's brave. She's our girl. Our girl. Yes, she was ours. Gerald's granddaughter, carrying his stubborn determination and my fierce protective instinct. If anyone could survive this, it was Jasmine. We parked 2 blocks away, just as I had done the night before. The November sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the quiet street. Thomas pulled equipment from his trunk, a camera with a telephoto lens, what looked like some kind of listening device, and I noticed with a chill, a gun in a holster that he clipped to his belt. "Thomas," I started. "Just a precaution, Mom. I pray to God I never have to use it, but if it comes down to protecting you or Jasmine." He didn't finish, just checked the weapon with practiced efficiency that told me this wasn't the first time he'd prepared for potential danger. We approached the house from the back, using the tall hedges and overgrown bushes as cover. The property was eerily quiet. No sounds of children playing, no television noise, nothing. Just the whisper of wind through bare branches and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Thomas positioned himself near a window that looked into the living room and gestured for me to stay behind him. Through the dirty glass, I could see Marcus pacing back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. His face was red, veins standing out in his neck, his free hand gesturing angrily. He was yelling at someone, though we couldn't make out the words from outside. Where was Denise? Where was Jasmine? Thomas pointed toward the back of the house, toward that small basement window I had crouched beside the night before. My heart clenched. If Jasmine had gone down there, we crept closer, every snapped twig under our feet sounding like a gunshot in my ears. The basement window was still dirty, still barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Thomas knelt beside it, positioning his listening device against the glass. He pressed a button, and suddenly, through the small speaker, I heard sounds from inside. Breathing, fast, frightened breathing. Then a small voice, barely more than a whisper. "It's okay. I'm going to help you. My grandma knows. She's going to save us. Jasmine." Tears flooded my eyes so fast I could barely see. My baby was down there. She was down there with that other child, and God only knew how much longer before Marcus discovered them. Then another voice, thin and weak with disuse. "Your grandma? How does she know?" I told her everything. She believes me. She always believes me. The simple faith in those words broke something inside me. Jasmine trusted me. She had trusted me enough to share her terrible secret, and now she was down in that basement, betting her life that I would come through for her. Thomas was recording everything on his phone, the device picking up every word. Evidence. But evidence wouldn't matter if Marcus found them before the police arrived. As if summoned by my thoughts, I heard a door slam inside the house. Heavy footsteps. Marcus's voice, loud and aggressive. "Denise, have you checked the basement?" Ice flooded my veins. Why would she be in the basement? That was Denise's voice, higher pitched than normal, tinted with panic. "Marcus, where could she have gone? What if someone took her? What if—" "Nobody took her," Marcus snapped. "Kids don't just disappear. She's hiding somewhere trying to be cute. Well, when I find her, she's going to learn what happens to little girls who scare their parents like this." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Thomas and I locked eyes, and I saw my own terror reflected in his face. We had minutes at most before Marcus checked the basement. "We need to create a distraction," Thomas whispered urgently. "Something to keep him away from that basement until the cops get here." But before either of us could move, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder, coming closer. Marcus heard them too. Through the living room window I watched his face transform. The anger drained away, replaced by something much worse. Calculation. Cold, careful calculation. He grabbed Denise's arm, leaned close to say something we couldn't hear, and then both of them rushed toward the back of the house, toward the basement. "No," I breathed. "No, no, no." Thomas was already moving, running toward the front door. I followed, my 67-year-old legs pumping with adrenaline I didn't know I still possessed. He didn't knock, didn't announce himself. He simply kicked the door near the lock, and the old wood splintered inward with a crack that echoed like thunder. We burst into the house just as Marcus reached the basement door. His hand was on the knob, twisting it open, when Thomas's voice rang out behind him. "Police are 30 seconds out, Marcus. You want to add assaulting children to your charges? Because that's what happens if you open that door." Marcus spun around, his face contorting with rage when he saw us. "You!" he spat at me. "You crazy old bitch. I should have known you'd stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Where's my granddaughter?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Where's Jasmine?" "Your granddaughter?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Your granddaughter is a little liar, just like her crazy grandmother. There's nothing in that basement except old boxes and... But his lies were cut short by the sound of police cars screeching to a stop outside, car doors slamming, heavy boots on the porch, voices shouting, "Police! We have a warrant!" Everything happened so fast then. Officers flooded into the house, weapons drawn. Someone grabbed Marcus, spinning him around and forcing him face first against the wall. Someone else took hold of Denise, who was crying now, stammering that she didn't know, she didn't understand, this was all a mistake. But I barely registered any of it. All I cared about was that basement door. "My granddaughter is down there," I told the first officer I could grab. "Jasmine Washington, 7 years old. And there's another child too. Please, you have to get them out." The officer, a young woman with kind eyes, nodded and spoke into her radio. "We need child services and EMTs on scene immediately. Possible multiple minors in the basement." 2 officers descended the basement stairs, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I tried to follow, but Thomas held me back. "Let them do their job, Mom. Let them bring her up safely." The wait was agony. Seconds stretched into eternities. I could hear voices from below, calm professional tones mixed with soft crying. Then footsteps coming back up. And suddenly there she was, Jasmine, filthy, her clothes torn, her face streaked with tears and dirt, but alive, alive. "Grandma!" She broke away from the officer holding her hand and ran to me. I dropped to my knees and caught her, wrapping my arms around her small body and holding her so tight I was probably hurting her, but I couldn't stop, couldn't let go. My baby, my brave, terrifying, wonderful baby. "I'm sorry, Grandma." She sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to help her. I couldn't leave her down there anymore. I couldn't." "Shh, baby. Shh. You didn't do anything wrong. You were so brave. So brave." Behind Jasmine, 2 paramedics were carefully guiding another child up the stairs. She was smaller than Jasmine, painfully thin, with matted hair and hollow eyes. But those eyes, I recognized them from the news reports, from the missing person posters that had papered our neighborhood months ago. Kayla Mitchell. She was alive. The paramedics rushed both girls outside to waiting ambulances. I wanted to go with Jasmine, but there were questions. So many questions. Detectives who needed statements, descriptions, timelines. Thomas stayed close, his hand on my shoulder, anchoring me while I relived every horrible moment of the past 2 days. I told them about Jasmine's confession, about what I witnessed through the basement window, about the crying I heard. I showed them the drawing Jasmine had made, the one I'd photographed on my phone. I told them about Kayla Mitchell and the other missing girls, about Marcus's history and suspicious phone records that Thomas had uncovered. One detective, a graying man with tired eyes who introduced himself as Detective Barnes, listened intently to everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Washington," he finally said, "I want you to understand something. What you did, coming to us, gathering evidence, recording those conversations, that saved lives tonight. Not just Kayla's life, your granddaughter's too." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But you also took enormous risks. If Marcus had discovered what you were doing before we got here..." "I know," I said quietly. "I know it was dangerous. But Detective, what else could I do? That was my granddaughter, and there was a child suffering. I couldn't do nothing." He nodded slowly. Detective Barnes nodded slowly, something like respect crossing his weathered face. "I understand, and for what it's worth, you did the right thing. We've been trying to crack this case for months." "This case?" I looked up sharply. "You mean there are others? More children?" His jaw tightened. "We've had 5 missing girls in the Memphis area over the past 18 months. All similar ages, all similar circumstances. Kayla Mitchell was the 3rd. We suspected a trafficking ring, but could never get enough evidence to move on it. Until now." My stomach churned. 5 children. 5 families torn apart, not knowing if their daughters were alive or dead, suffering or worse. And my own daughter had been living with one of the monsters responsible. "Denise," I whispered. "My daughter. Was she involved? Did she know?" Detective Barnes's expression became carefully neutral. "That's what we're working to determine, ma'am. Your daughter is being questioned now. From what we've gathered so far, it appears Marcus was the primary actor, but we need to establish how much Mrs. Lee knew or participated in. The formal name, Mrs. Lee, sounded wrong. That was supposed to be a title of respect, of partnership. But how could Denise have been a partner to this? How could she have lived in that house, walked past that basement door every day, and not known what was happening beneath her feet? Unless she did know, unless she chose to look away. The thought made me physically ill. I turned away from the detective and vomited into the bushes, my whole body heaving with revulsion and grief. This was my daughter. The baby girl I had nursed, raised, loved. The little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her stories about princesses and happy endings. What had happened to her? When had she become someone capable of such evil? Or had she always carried this darkness inside, and I had simply refused to see it? Thomas appeared at my side with a bottle of water. I rinsed my mouth, trying to wash away the bitter taste. Around us, the scene continued to unfold like something from a nightmare. Crime scene technicians were arriving, unloading equipment from white vans. Neighbors had begun to gather on the street, held back by police tape, their faces shocked and curious and hungry for details they could gossip about later. I saw Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down, the woman who had brought Denise a casserole when they first moved in. She was whispering frantically to her husband, one hand over her mouth in horror. I saw Mr. Patterson, who had helped Marcus install a new mailbox just last month. His face was gray with shock, probably wondering what he had invited into his neighborhood, what monster he had smiled at and made small talk with about lawn care and property taxes. "Mom," Thomas's voice pulled me back. "They're taking Jasmine to St. Francis Hospital for evaluation. We should go." "What about Denise? What about my daughter?" "Mom," he hesitated, his eyes full of pain. "She's being taken into custody. There's nothing we can do for her right now." But I had to see her, had to look into her eyes and understand how this had happened. I pushed past Thomas and the officers trying to redirect me, moving toward the police car where Denise sat in the back seat, her wrists bound with zip ties. She looked up when I approached, and our eyes met through the window. For a moment, just a moment, I saw my little girl again, scared, lost, silently begging me to fix things the way I always had when she was small. Then her expression hardened. Her lip curled in something that might have been contempt or might have been self-hatred. "Go ahead," she said, her voice muffled through the glass. "Say it. Say you knew all along that I was worthless, that I was never good enough, that I was always the broken one." I pressed my palm against the cold window, my heart shattering into pieces so small they could never be put back together. "Denise, baby, I never thought that. Never. I loved you. I love you. But what you did, what you let happen, how could you? How could you let that man hurt innocent children?" "You don't understand." Her voice rose to a shriek. "You never understood. After Daddy died, I had nothing. Marcus was all I had. He took care of me when you were too busy mourning your precious Gerald to even see me. So yes, I looked the other way. Yes, I pretended not to hear the crying. Because what was I supposed to do? End up alone like you? A pathetic old woman with nothing but memories?" Each word was a knife, slicing deeper than the last. "I would rather be alone than be a monster," I said quietly. "And you had Jasmine. You had a beautiful daughter who needed you, who looked up to you, who is traumatized now because her own mother chose a criminal over her safety." Denise's face crumpled. She turned away, pressing her forehead against the opposite window, her shoulders shaking with sobs. An officer moved forward, gently directing me away. "Ma'am, you need to step back now." I let Thomas guide me to his car. My legs felt like water, barely holding me up. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my daughter, had been revealed as a lie, or worse, a truth I had refused to see. The drive to St. Francis Hospital passed in a blur. Thomas talked, I think, saying something about lawyers and investigations and protective custody for Jasmine. But I couldn't focus on his words. I kept seeing Denise's face in that police car, kept hearing her accusation. "Too busy mourning your precious Gerald to even see me." Was it true? After Gerald died, had I been so consumed by my own grief that I failed to see my daughter drowning in hers? Had I been so focused on keeping myself together that I let Denise fall apart? And in falling apart, had she become this? At the hospital, we were directed to the pediatric wing. Jasmine was in a private room, surrounded by doctors and nurses and a child psychologist. When she saw me, she reached out her arms and I went to her, holding her while medical professionals worked around us, checking her vitals, examining her for injuries. "Is she okay?" I asked the doctor, a petite woman with gentle hands and tired eyes. "Did they hurt her?" "Physically, she's unharmed," the doctor said. "Minor scrapes and bruises, probably from the basement stairs. But Mrs. Washington, we need to discuss the psychological trauma. What Jasmine experienced, what she witnessed, is going to require extensive therapy. Children who go through events like this often develop PTSD, anxiety disorders, night terrors." I nodded, barely processing the words. Of course Jasmine would need help. Of course this would leave scars. But she was alive, she was safe, and she was braver than anyone I had ever known. "Grandma?" Jasmine's small voice pulled my attention back to her. "Where's Mommy?" My throat closed up. How did I tell a 7-year-old that her mother was being arrested, that her father figure was a monster, that her family, as she knew it, no longer existed? "Your mommy she's with the police right now, baby. They need to ask her some questions." "Is she in trouble?" Jasmine's eyes were too knowing, too aware for a child her age. Because of what was in the basement? Because she didn't stop it? The fact that Jasmine understood, even partially, broke my heart all over again. "Yes, baby. I think she might be in trouble." Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers twisting the hospital blanket. Then, "I still love her, Grandma, even though she did something bad. Is that okay?" I pulled her close, tears streaming down my face. "Of course it's okay. She's your mother. You can love her and still be angry at her. You can love her and still know that what she did was wrong. Love isn't simple, baby. It's the most complicated thing in the world." We stayed at the hospital for hours. Social services arrived, a woman named Patricia Chen with a kind face and a clipboard full of forms. She asked questions carefully, gently, about Jasmine's living situation, about where she would stay now that both her parents were in custody. "She'll stay with me," I said firmly. "I'm her grandmother. I'll take care of her." Ms. Chen nodded, making notes. "We'll need to do a home evaluation, background checks, the standard procedures. But given the circumstances and your cooperation with the police investigation, I don't anticipate any issues with placing Jasmine in your care." Thomas stepped forward. "I'll help, Mom. Whatever you need, financially, legally, emotionally. Jasmine's family. We take care of family. If you're still with me in this story, I need you to know that what I'm sharing is real. This happened. These horrors exist in our world. Please share this video. Let people know that staying silent is never the answer. Sometimes speaking up, even when it tears your family apart, is the only way to save a life." In a room down the hall, Kayla Mitchell was being reunited with her parents. I could hear the mother's sobs from where we sat, cries of joy and relief and anguish all mixed together. They had spent 3 months believing their daughter was gone forever. 3 months of hope slowly dying, of imagining the worst, of planning a funeral they prayed they would never need. And now she was back, damaged, traumatized, but alive and back in their arms. Later, much later, after Jasmine had finally fallen asleep with her hand clutching mine, Detective Barnes returned. He looked even more exhausted than before, the weight of what he had uncovered evident in every line of his face. "Mrs. Washington, I wanted to update you personally," he said quietly, so as not to wake Jasmine. "We've completed our initial search of the property. In addition to the basement where we found Kayla, we discovered a false wall in the garage leading to a storage space. Inside were evidence, documents, photographs, computer equipment." His pause told me everything I needed to know about what kind of evidence they had found. The kind that would ensure Marcus spent the rest of his life in prison. The kind that no grandmother should ever have to think about. Marcus Lee has already confessed to multiple counts of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. He's implicating others as well, a network of individuals involved in child trafficking. Your information about his sister and his phone contacts gave us the leverage we needed to make him talk. Mrs. Washington, because of you, we may be able to recover other missing children. We may be able to bring down an entire trafficking operation. The room spun slightly. Other children, other families who might get their babies back because Jasmine had been brave enough to tell her secret, and I had been brave enough to believe her. What about Denise? The question came out barely above a whisper. My daughter. Detective Barnes's expression softened with something like sympathy. Your daughter is claiming she knew nothing about Marcus's activities. Says she thought the crying was from neighborhood kids, that she never went into the basement because Marcus told her it was dangerous due to mold. She's painting herself as another victim. Is it true? Could she really not have known? He sighed heavily. In my experience, Mrs. Washington, people see what they want to see. Did your daughter actively participate in the kidnappings? No, we don't believe so. But did she willfully ignore obvious signs that something was very wrong? Did she choose her relationship with Marcus over the safety of innocent children? He paused. That's for the courts to decide. But I will say this. Jasmine told us her mother specifically instructed her never to go into the basement, never to tell anyone what she heard. Your daughter knew something was down there. Maybe not the full extent, but she knew. I nodded slowly, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Denise had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to act. Enough to call the police. Enough to protect innocent children. But she had chosen not to. She had chosen Marcus, chosen her own comfort and security, over doing what was right. And that choice, more than anything else, told me who my daughter had become. Not the monster Marcus was, perhaps, but not the person I had raised her to be either. Something in between. Something broken and weak and culpable. Over the next few days, the story exploded across Memphis and then nationally. News crews camped outside my house, asking for interviews, for statements, for the exclusive story of how a grandmother and her brave granddaughter helped bring down a child trafficking ring. I refused them all. This wasn't about fame or attention. This was about Jasmine, about Kayla, about all the other children who had suffered. They deserved privacy and dignity, not to have their trauma become entertainment for the masses. But I couldn't control everything. Details leaked. Jasmine's drawing appeared online. Denise's arrest photo circulated on social media, with thousands of strangers weighing in on what kind of mother she was, what her punishment should be, whether she deserved any mercy. I stopped reading the comments after the first day. The vitriol was too much, even for someone I was angry at, even for someone who had failed so spectacularly. Denise was still my daughter, still the baby I had brought into this world, still someone I loved, even as I grappled with what she had done. The court case would take months, probably years, to fully resolve. Marcus was facing life in prison, possibly multiple life sentences. Denise was charged with child endangerment, failure to report a crime, and obstruction of justice. Her lawyers were arguing for a plea deal, claiming she was under Marcus's psychological control, that she was terrified of him, that she should be treated as another victim rather than an accomplice. I didn't know what I believed anymore. Maybe it was all true. Maybe Denise really was so beaten down and controlled that she felt she had no choice. Or maybe that was just another convenient excuse for moral cowardice. Either way, it didn't change what needed to happen next. Jasmine needed a stable home. She needed therapy, routine, unconditional love. She needed to know that adults could be trusted, that the world wasn't entirely made of monsters hiding in basements, and I needed to be that for her. We settled into a new routine. Jasmine moved into my spare bedroom, the one I had kept for her weekend visits. Thomas helped me paint it a soft lavender color she had chosen, and we decorated it with posters of her favorite cartoon characters. We established rules and schedules: breakfast at 7:30, school at 8:15, therapy appointments every Tuesday and Thursday, homework before dinner, bedtime stories every night. The nightmares came, as the doctors had warned they would. Jasmine would wake up screaming, calling for the girl in the basement, sometimes calling for her mother. I would rush to her room, hold her while she sobbed, reassure her that she was safe, that I would never let anyone hurt her. On particularly bad nights, she would ask if her mother was okay, if her mother missed her, if her mother was sorry for what she had done. "I think she is sorry, baby," I would say, smoothing back her curls. "I think she's very sorry. But sorry doesn't fix everything. Sometimes people make choices that have consequences they can't take back." "Will I ever see her again?" Jasmine asked one night, her voice small in the darkness. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's up to the courts and the doctors and eventually up to you. If you want to see her someday, when you're older and ready, we'll figure out how to make that happen safely. But you never have to see her if you don't want to. Your feelings matter most." The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted either. Part of me never wanted to see Denise again. never wanted to look into the eyes of the daughter who had betrayed everything I thought I taught her. But another part of me, the part that remembered rocking her as a baby, that remembered her first steps and first words, that part still ached for her, still hoped she might somehow find redemption. But that was my burden to carry, not Jasmine's. 6 weeks after that terrible night, I received word that Kayla Mitchell's family wanted to meet us. They had been released from the hospital after a week of observation and evaluation, and were now in intensive family therapy, trying to rebuild what Marcus had broken. Mrs. Mitchell, Janet, she insisted I call her, came to my house on a gray Saturday morning. She brought Kayla with her, though both the therapist and I had worried about whether the girls should see each other so soon. But the moment Kayla saw Jasmine, her face lit up with the first genuine smile I had seen from her. "You came back," she whispered. "I thought I dreamed you. I thought maybe I made you up." Jasmine ran to her and threw her arms around the smaller girl. "I told you I'd get help. I told you my grandma would save us." Watching them embrace, two children bound together by shared trauma, I felt something shift in my chest. This was why it had all been worth it. The fear, the heartbreak, the destruction of my family. All of it was worth it for this moment. Janet and I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee while the girls played in the living room, carefully supervised, but allowed to just be children for a while. We didn't talk about the case or the trial or what they had endured. We talked about ordinary things: school, favorite foods, the challenge of helping traumatized children feel safe again. "I don't know how to thank you," Janet said finally, her eyes welling with tears. "You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back my whole world." "Jasmine is the one who saved her," I said. I just believed her, and I refused to let anyone tell me I was crazy for believing her." Janet reached across the table and gripped my hand. "That's everything. Believing a child when they tell you something is wrong. So many people didn't believe me when I said Kayla wouldn't just wander off. They suggested she ran away, that maybe there were problems at home we weren't admitting to. They looked at me like I was hysterical, paranoid. But you believed Jasmine. You trusted her. And because of that trust, my baby is home." We sat together in silence for a long moment. Two grandmothers who had seen the worst of what humans could do, and somehow found the strength to keep going. Before they left, Kayla gave Jasmine a small bracelet she had woven from colorful threads. "So you remember you're brave," she said. "The bravest person I ever met." Jasmine put it on immediately, and I noticed she touched it constantly over the following days, like a talisman, a reminder that she had done something important, something heroic, even though it cost her the family she had known. The preliminary hearing for Denise came 3 months after her arrest. I had to testify about what Jasmine told me, what I witnessed, what I knew, and when I knew it. Denise sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back severely, her face gaunt from weight loss. Our eyes met across the courtroom several times. I tried to read her expression: remorse, anger, resignation, but I couldn't. My daughter had become a stranger to me. When I finished testifying, I walked past her table. She reached out suddenly, grabbing my hand. The bailiff moved forward, but I shook my head slightly, indicating it was okay. "Mom," Denise whispered, her voice cracking. Please don't let them take Jasmine away from me forever. Please tell them I love her. Tell them I'm sorry." I looked down at her, at this woman who was my daughter and also wasn't, and felt my heart splinter in new directions. "I'll tell her you love her," I said quietly. "But Denise, love means protecting people. Love means doing the hard thing, even when you're scared. You didn't do that. You chose wrong. And now you have to live with those choices." I pulled my hand away and walked out of the courtroom, leaving her crying at the defense table. That night, Jasmine asked me what happened in court. "Your mother wanted me to tell you she loves you," I said carefully, "and she's sorry." Jasmine thought about this, her small face serious. "Okay," she said finally. "Tell her I love her too, but tell her I'm mad at her. Really, really mad. That's fair, baby. That's completely fair." The judge ultimately ruled that Denise would stand trial for child endangerment and obstruction of justice. The trafficking and kidnapping charges that Marcus faced weren't applied to her, as prosecutors couldn't prove she actively participated in those crimes. But the charges she did face carried a potential sentence of 8 to 15 years. Her lawyers continued pushing for a plea deal, arguing that she was a victim of domestic abuse, that Marcus had controlled and manipulated her. And maybe it was true. Maybe Denise really had been trapped in a relationship she couldn't escape, terrified of what Marcus might do if she defied him. But she had still made a choice. Every day she heard those cries from the basement and did nothing. She made a choice. Every time she told Jasmine not to tell anyone, not to speak up, she made a choice. And those choices had consequences. Marcus's trial came first. I attended every day, sitting in the back row, bearing witness. I needed to see him held accountable, needed to look into the face of the man who had terrorized innocent children and know that he would never have the chance to hurt another child again. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings Thomas had made, the physical evidence from the basement and storage room, the testimony from Kayla and other children they had recovered in subsequent raids on Marcus's network. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, the judge gave him 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. "Mr. Lee," the judge said, his voice hard as stone, "you are a predator of the worst kind. You preyed on the most vulnerable members of our society, children who couldn't defend themselves, who trusted adults to protect them. Instead, you violated that trust in the most heinous ways imaginable. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison, and when you die, you will not be mourned." Marcus showed no emotion, just sat there with blank eyes, as if none of this was really happening to him. I wondered what went through his mind, if he felt any remorse at all, or if people like him were simply incapable of that kind of self-reflection. I would never know, and truthfully, I didn't care. He was going away forever. That was all that mattered. Denise's trial took place 4 months later. By then, I had testified so many times, grand jury, preliminary hearings, depositions, that the words came automatically. Yes, Jasmine told me about crying in the basement. Yes, I witnessed Marcus entering the basement with food. Yes, Denise specifically instructed Jasmine to keep secrets from me. The prosecution painted Denise as a willing accomplice who prioritized her relationship over children's lives. The defense painted her as another victim, a battered woman too afraid to act. The truth, as always, probably lay somewhere in between. The jury was out for 2 days. When they returned, they found Denise guilty of child endangerment and obstruction, but acquitted her of the more serious conspiracy charges. The judge sentenced her to 12 years, with the possibility of parole after 8 if she maintained good behavior and completed extensive therapy and rehabilitation programs. 12 years. Jasmine would be 19 when her mother got out, nearly an adult herself. As they led Denise away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one last time, mouthed something that might have been, "I'm sorry," or might have been, "I love you," or might have been nothing at all. I didn't respond, just watched her disappear through the door that would close behind her for the next decade. Life has a strange way of moving forward, even when you think you've been shattered beyond repair. The days after Denise's sentencing blurred together, a haze of legal paperwork, therapy appointments, and the mundane routines that somehow kept us grounded when everything else felt like quicksand. Jasmine started 2nd grade that fall. I walked her to the bus stop every morning, holding her hand a little tighter than necessary, watching until the yellow bus turned the corner and disappeared from sight. The other mothers at the bus stop knew our story. Everyone in Memphis knew our story by then, but most were kind enough to keep their distance, offering small smiles and nods instead of the intrusive questions I knew they wanted to ask. Mrs. Patterson from down the street was different. She approached me one morning after the children had left, her face creased with concern. "Loretta, I just want you to know, what you did took courage, real courage. I don't know if I would have been strong enough to turn in my own child." "It wasn't about strength," I told her, my voice tired. "It was about doing what was right, even when right felt like it was killing me." She nodded, squeezed my arm gently, and walked away. I stood there alone on the empty sidewalk, wondering if she was right. Had it taken courage? Or had I simply done the only thing possible when faced with an impossible choice? At home, I found myself talking to Gerald more than ever. I would sit in front of his photograph, the one from our 25th anniversary, where he's wearing that ridiculous Hawaiian shirt I bought him as a joke, and I would tell him everything. "Gerald, I don't know if I failed her," I whispered one afternoon, my fingers tracing the edge of the frame. "Denise, our baby girl. Somewhere along the way something went wrong, and I don't know if it was my fault. After you died, I was so consumed by my own grief. Did I miss the signs? Did I not see her falling apart? Gerald's smile in the photograph never changed, forever frozen in that moment of happiness. But I imagined what he would say if he could. He would tell me that we can't save people who don't want to be saved, that we can only control our own choices, not the choices of our children, that loving someone doesn't mean accepting their wrong actions. I hoped he was right. Thomas became a constant presence in our lives. He moved back to Memphis, taking a job with a local investigation firm so he could be close by. Every Sunday, he would come for dinner and we would sit around my kitchen table, Thomas, Jasmine, and me, trying to rebuild some semblance of family from the wreckage. "Uncle Thomas," Jasmine asked one Sunday while we were washing dishes together, "do you think Mom ever thinks about me?" Thomas glanced at me, silently asking how to handle this. I gave a small nod. Let him answer honestly. "I think she thinks about you every single day, sweetheart," he said gently. "I think you're probably the first thing she thinks about when she wakes up and the last thing she thinks about before she goes to sleep. Then why did she do it?" Jasmine's voice was so small, so confused. "Why did she let those bad things happen if she loves me?" Thomas knelt down to her level, his hands on her shoulders. "Sometimes grown-ups make really bad choices, Jazz. Sometimes they're scared, or they're confused, or they convince themselves that what they're doing isn't as bad as it really is. It doesn't mean the love isn't real. It just means love isn't always enough to make people do the right thing." Jasmine absorbed this, her face serious beyond her years. "I wish it was enough," she said finally. "Me too, baby," I whispered, pulling her into a hug. "Me too." The therapy sessions were helping, the psychologist assured me. Dr. Rachel Morrison specialized in childhood trauma, and she saw Jasmine twice a week. After 3 months, she invited me in for a progress meeting. "Jasmine is remarkably resilient," Dr. Morrison told me, reviewing her notes. "She's processing the trauma in healthy ways, expressing her feelings through art and play therapy. But Mrs. Washington, I need you to understand that this isn't something she'll get over. The trauma will always be part of her story. Our goal isn't to erase it, but to help her integrate it into her identity in a way that doesn't define or limit her." "Will she be okay?" I asked, the question that kept me awake most nights. Dr. Morrison smiled gently. "Define okay. Will she grow up to be a functional adult? Almost certainly. Will she have challenges related to trust and attachment? Probably. Will she need ongoing therapeutic support? Likely. But Loretta, she has you. She has a grandmother who believed her, who fought for her, who provides stability and unconditional love. That's the best foundation we could ask for." I nodded, blinking back tears. I wanted to give Jasmine everything. A normal childhood, a happy family, a mother who hadn't failed her. But I could only give her what I had. A small house with creaky floors, a garden full of roses, and a grandmother's love that would never falter. It had to be enough. It was all I had. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Denise. The prison envelope felt heavy in my hands, and I stared at it for a full day before finding the courage to open it. "Dear Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll throw it away the moment you see my name. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But I need to write this, even if you never see it. I've been in therapy here, court-mandated at first, but I keep going even when I don't have to. Dr. Singh, my therapist, says I need to take responsibility for my choices. Not Marcus's choices, my choices. And here's what I've finally admitted to myself. I knew. Not everything, not the full extent of what Marcus was doing, but I knew something was very wrong. I heard the crying. I saw him going to the basement at strange hours. I noticed money we shouldn't have had, and I chose not to look closer. I chose not to ask questions. I chose Marcus over what was right. Dr. Singh says that's called willful blindness. I was so terrified of being alone, of losing the life we'd built, that I convinced myself it wasn't my problem, that if I just didn't look too closely, I could pretend everything was fine. I was so angry at you at first, angry that you turned me in, angry that you believed Jasmine over me, angry that you destroyed my life. But Mom, you didn't destroy my life. I did that all by myself. You saved Jasmine. You saved Kayla. You did what I should have done. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I want you to tell Jasmine, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her that what happened wasn't her fault. Tell her that her mother loves her, even though her mother failed her in the worst possible way. I'm enclosing a form. It gives you full legal guardianship of Jasmine. I'm terminating my parental rights. Not because I don't love her. I do, with everything I am. But because she deserves better than a mother who could do what I did. She deserves a parent who will always choose her safety over their own comfort. She deserves you, Mom. She always has. Love, Denise. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? For Denise to take responsibility, to acknowledge the depth of her failure, to put Jasmine first, even if that meant stepping away. But holding that letter, reading those words of remorse and self-awareness, I felt only a crushing sadness. This was my daughter, and somewhere underneath the mistakes and the moral cowardice, there was still the little girl who used to pick dandelions for me and call them beautiful flowers. That night, I asked Jasmine if she wanted to write a letter back to her mother. She thought about it for a long time, sitting at the kitchen table with a blank piece of paper in front of her. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say, I told her. But sometimes writing things down helps us understand our own feelings. She picked up the pencil and began to write, her tongue sticking out slightly the way it always did when she concentrated. When she finished, she folded the paper carefully and handed it to me. Will you read it to make sure it's okay? She asked. I unfolded it, my hands trembling slightly. Dear Mom, Grandma says you wrote her a letter. She says you're sorry. I'm glad you're sorry. I'm still mad at you, but I'm glad you're sorry. I'm okay. Grandma takes good care of me. We made cookies yesterday, and I got an A on my spelling test. I have a new friend at school named Maya. She has a dog named Biscuit. Dr. Morrison says I don't have to forgive you right now. She says I can take as long as I need. So I'm not saying I forgive you yet, but maybe someday I will. I don't know. I still love you, even though I'm mad. Grandma says that's okay. She says love is complicated. Love, Jasmine P.S. Grandma still has the teddy bear you gave me when I was little. His name is Mr. Snuggles. I sleep with him every night. I wiped my eyes and looked at my granddaughter, this incredible child who had survived so much and still had room in her heart for love and maybe eventually forgiveness. It's perfect, baby, I whispered. Absolutely perfect. We mailed it the next day. I didn't know if it would help Denise or hurt her to receive it, but it helped Jasmine to write it, and that was what mattered. Life continued to move forward. Seasons changed. Jasmine's 8th birthday came, and we threw a small party in the backyard. Janet brought Kayla, and the 2 girls played together, still bonded by their shared experience, but slowly becoming just regular kids who liked the same cartoons and giggled over silly jokes. Thomas brought his new girlfriend, a kind woman named Angela, who worked as a teacher. She was wonderful with Jasmine, never pushing too hard, but always ready with a smile or a listening ear. Watching them together, I felt a small bloom of hope. Maybe Thomas would build the family that Denise couldn't. Maybe there would be more grandchildren someday, cousins for Jasmine to grow up with. The other missing girls from Marcus's network were eventually found. 2 were recovered alive from locations Marcus revealed during his interrogation. 3 others weren't. Their families held funerals for children who had been missing for over a year, finally getting closure, but of the worst possible kind. I attended those funerals. It felt important somehow, to bear witness, to honor those children who didn't get saved in time, to remind myself why all of it, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the destruction of my family, had been necessary. At one funeral, the mother approached me. Her name was Sharon Rodriguez, and her daughter Gabriela had been missing for 14 months before they found her remains. They told me you're the one who broke the case, she said, her voice hollow with grief. They said your granddaughter led the police to the others. I'm so sorry, I whispered, inadequate words for an immeasurable loss. I'm so sorry we didn't find her in time. Sharon took my hands, her grip surprisingly strong. You found my baby, that's what matters. I can bury her now, I can lay her to rest. Before I didn't know, was she suffering? Was she calling for me? Was she still out there somewhere, waiting for me to find her? Now I know. It's horrible, but at least I know. And that's because of you and Jasmine. We stood together in that cemetery, 2 women bound by tragedy, and I understood something I hadn't before. The truth was cruel. The truth destroyed families and shattered illusions and exposed the darkest parts of human nature. But the truth also brought closure. The truth allowed healing to begin. The truth saved lives. And sometimes, the truth was the only gift we could give. A year after Denise's sentencing, the legal paperwork finally went through. I officially became Jasmine's legal guardian, with full parental rights. Denise had signed away all claims to her daughter, setting her free from a mother who had failed her. We didn't celebrate, but I did mark the occasion in my own way. I took Jasmine to Gerald's grave, something we did once a month to tend the flowers and tell him about our lives. "Grandpa," Jasmine said, kneeling by the headstone, "Grandma says you would have been proud of me, that I did something brave." She paused, as if waiting for an answer that would never come. "I miss Mom sometimes," she continued quietly, "but I'm glad I live with Grandma. She believes me when I tell her things. She always listens." I knelt beside her, my old knees protesting, and put my arm around her shoulders. "Your grandpa loved you so much, baby. He only got to meet you once, when you were just a tiny baby. But he loved you from the moment he saw you. Do you think he's watching us? From heaven? I do. And I think he's so proud of his granddaughter. His brave, strong, incredible granddaughter." We sat there together until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The same sky that had watched over all our sorrows was still there, still beautiful, still promising that tomorrow would come. That night, after Jasmine was asleep, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and allowed myself to finally fully grieve, not just for what was lost, but for what could never be. I grieved for the daughter I thought I had, the one who would never do something so unforgivable. I grieved for the grandmother I thought I would be, the one who could give her grandchild a normal, happy family. I grieved for Jasmine's innocence, stolen far too young. I grieved for all the children who suffered because adults failed them. And when the tears finally stopped, when I had cried until I had nothing left, I made myself a promise. I would not let this darkness win. I would not let Marcus's evil or Denise's cowardice define our story. Jasmine and I would build something new from the ashes, something good and strong and true. We would survive this, more than survive. We would thrive. 2 years later, Jasmine was thriving in 4th grade. She had joined the school's art club, where her drawings were so impressive that the teacher entered them in a citywide competition. She won 2nd place, and we hung the ribbon proudly on the refrigerator. She still saw Dr. Morrison once a week, and probably would for years to come. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at sudden loud noises, still asked questions about why her mother made the choices she did. But she also laughed. She played. She had friends and hobbies and dreams for the future. She wanted to be an artist, or maybe a veterinarian, or possibly an astronaut. Her ambitions changed weekly, and I loved every iteration. Thomas and Angela got married in a small ceremony in my backyard. Jasmine was the flower girl, beaming in her lavender dress, watching my son exchange vows, promising to love and protect and choose his partner every single day. I felt a bittersweet joy. This was what love should look like. This was what Denise had failed to understand. I received occasional letters from Denise. Not many, maybe 4 or 5 over those 2 years. They were always brief, always apologetic, always asking about Jasmine, but never asking to see her. She seemed to understand that she had forfeited that right, and I was grateful she didn't push. Jasmine read some of the letters when she was ready. Others she asked me to put away for later, when she felt stronger. Dr. Morrison said this was healthy, letting Jasmine control the relationship on her own terms, at her own pace. "Do you think I'll ever want to see her?" Jasmine asked me one day while we were baking cookies, our Sunday tradition. "I don't know, baby. How do you feel about it?" She frowned, carefully measuring flour. "I'm not mad anymore, not like I used to be. But I'm not ready yet. Maybe when I'm older. Maybe when I understand more. That's perfectly okay. You get to decide if and when you're ready. Nobody else." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer, and we went back to baking. Some questions didn't have immediate answers. Some wounds needed time to heal. The 3-year anniversary of that terrible November night came and went. The media had mostly moved on to other tragedies, other scandals. Memphis had new horrors to fixate on. Our story became just another statistic, another case file, another example of how evil can hide in plain sight. But for us, it was still our lives, still our daily reality. Still, the thing that shaped every decision and colored every interaction. Kayla's family moved away after the first year. Janet said they needed a fresh start, somewhere without the constant reminders. I understood, though I missed them. The girls exchanged letters and video calls, maintaining the friendship that trauma had forged. Before they left, Janet gave me a gift, a journal. Write it down, she told me. All of it. What happened, how you felt, what you learned. Someday, when Jasmine is older and ready, she might want to know the full story. And someday another grandmother might need to hear that she's not crazy for believing a child's whisper. So I wrote. Late at night, after Jasmine was asleep, I filled page after page with our story. Not to relive the horror, but to honor it. To create a record that said, this happened, we survived, and here's how. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for understanding why speaking up mattered, even when it cost me everything. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's doubting themselves, someone who's afraid to speak the truth, please share this. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the thing that gives you courage to act. On Jasmine's 10th birthday, she asked me a question I'd been dreading. Grandma, do you think what happened was my fault? If I hadn't told you about the basement, would Mom still be here? Would we still be a regular family? My heart broke all over again. I pulled her onto my lap, though she was getting too big for this, and looked into her eyes. Gerald's eyes, passed down through the generations. Jasmine Marie Washington, you listened to me carefully. What happened was not your fault, not one bit. You were a little girl who witnessed something terrible, and you were brave enough to tell a trusted adult. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. What happened to your mother? That was a consequence of her choices, not yours. But if I had kept the secret, then Kayla might still be in that basement. Then other little girls might have been taken. Then the monster who hurt all those children might still be free to hurt more. Baby, you saved lives. You're a hero, even if being a hero meant your own family got torn apart. She cried then, deep sobbing tears that came from somewhere profound and painful. I held her and let her cry, understanding that this was grief she needed to express. Grief for the mother she lost. Grief for the family that could never be. Grief for the childhood that was stolen from her. When the tears finally subsided, she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I miss having a mom, she whispered. I know, baby. I know. But I'm glad I have you. I kissed her forehead, tasting salt from her tears. And I'm glad I have you. So glad. That night, after Jasmine went to bed, I sat on my porch watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. The roses Gerald had loved were in full bloom, their scent heavy and sweet on the warm air. Somewhere in the distance, I heard children laughing, living their uncomplicated lives. I thought about everything that had happened. About the night Jasmine whispered her terrible secret. About the moment I pressed my ear to that cold basement window and heard crying. About watching my daughter being led away in handcuffs. About all the ways love can fail and all the ways it can prevail. And I realized something important. I didn't regret it. Not any of it. Yes, my family was broken. Yes, my daughter was in prison. Yes, Jasmine was traumatized and would carry scars for the rest of her life. But we had survived. We had chosen truth over comfort, justice over family loyalty, the safety of innocence over the protection of the guilty. And that mattered. That would always matter. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Just tucked Jasmine in. She wanted me to tell you good night. Says she loves you. I smiled, typing back. Tell her I love her too. More than all the stars. The night air was cool on my skin. The crickets sang their ancient songs. The world kept turning, indifferent to our small human dramas. But here, in this moment, on this porch, I felt something like peace. We had survived the darkness. And now, slowly, carefully, we were learning to live in the light again. Jasmine would grow up. She would go to middle school, then high school, then college. She would fall in love, have her heart broken, find her passion, build her life. She would make mistakes and learn from them. She would be stronger and more compassionate because of what she endured. And I would be there, every step of the way, the grandmother who believed her, the grandmother who fought for her, the grandmother who loved her enough to risk everything. That was my purpose now. Not to undo the past or fix what was irreparably broken, but to give Jasmine the foundation she needed to build a beautiful future despite her traumatic past. Some stories don't have happy endings. Real life is messier than that, more complicated. But some stories have hopeful endings. Endings that say, we endured, we survived, we're still here. This is one of those stories. 5 years after that terrible November night, I attended Denise's parole hearing. She had served 8 years, maintained perfect behavior, completed every therapy and rehabilitation program offered. Her lawyers argued she was a model prisoner who had taken full responsibility for her failures. I sat in the back of the hearing room, watching my daughter, now in her late 30s, grayer than she should be, lines etched deep in her face from years of regret, make her case to the parole board. I was a coward, she said, her voice steady but quiet. I knew something terrible was happening, and I chose ignorance because confronting it would have cost me my marriage, my comfortable life. I chose myself over innocent children. I chose a man over my own daughter's safety. There's no excuse for that. None. She paused, her hands folded carefully in her lap. I've spent 8 years trying to understand how I became someone capable of such moral failure. Therapy helped, books helped, time helped, but mostly, I had to face the fact that I was selfish and weak. I let fear control me. I let my need for security override my basic human decency. The parole board asked questions. She answered each one with painful honesty. Yes, she knew the crying wasn't normal. Yes, she suspected Marcus was involved in something criminal. No, she never tried to investigate or call the police. Yes, she told her daughter to keep secrets. Yes, she understood how that damaged Jasmine. Finally, they asked, if released, what would you do? Denise looked down at her hands. I would find a job. I would continue therapy. I would volunteer with organizations that help trafficking victims, if they'd have me. I understand they might not want someone with my history. And I would respect my daughter's boundaries completely. If she wants to see me, that's her choice. If she never wants to see me again, I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want the chance to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was. The board deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, they granted parole with strict conditions, mandatory therapy, regular check-ins with a parole officer, no contact with any of the victims' families unless initiated by them, and strict geographic restrictions. Denise would be released in 30 days. I didn't know how I felt about it. Relief, fear, anger that she got out after only 8 years when Marcus would die in prison, sadness that she had lost so much time with Jasmine. All of it. I felt all of it at once. I didn't tell Jasmine immediately. I waited until the timing felt right, until we were sitting in our favorite spot, the porch swing Gerald had built decades ago, gently rocking while the sunset painted the sky. Jazz, I need to tell you something. Your mother's parole was granted. She's getting out of prison next month. Jasmine was 15 now, tall and graceful, growing into a beautiful young woman. She didn't react immediately, just kept swinging gently, her face thoughtful. How do you feel about that? She asked finally. I asked you first. She smiled slightly at that. I don't know. It's weird. Part of me has been waiting for this, wondering what it would feel like. But now that it's real, she trailed off. You don't have to see her if you're not ready, I reminded her. You don't owe her anything. I know, but I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think I want to see her. Eventually. Not right away. But Dr. Morrison says I might need closure, and maybe the only way to get that is to talk to her face to face. I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. My granddaughter, so wise beyond her years, so thoughtful about her own healing. Whenever you're ready, baby, we'll do it together. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we swung together in comfortable silence, watching day turn to night. 3 months after her release, Denise requested a meeting. Through lawyers and therapists and carefully worded emails, we arranged a supervised visit at Dr. Morrison's office. Neutral ground. Safe. Jasmine was nervous that morning. She changed outfits 3 times, unable to decide what you're supposed to wear to see the mother you haven't seen in 8 years. Finally, she settled on jeans and her favorite purple sweater, the one that made her feel confident. Grandma, she said in the car, what if I don't know what to say? What if I see her and I'm still too angry? Or what if I'm not angry enough? There's no right way to feel, Jazz. Whatever you feel is valid, and you can end the meeting at any time. You're in control here. Dr. Morrison met us in the lobby, reassuring and calm as always. Denise is already in the room. Remember, Jasmine, this is for you, not for her. You get to say what you need to say, ask what you need to ask, and leave when you're ready. We entered the office together, and there she was, Denise, my daughter, Jasmine's mother. She looked older, tired, diminished somehow. Prison had hollowed her out, leaving something thinner and harder behind. But when she saw Jasmine, her entire face transformed. Love and regret and longing all mixed together in an expression that was almost painful to witness. "Hi, baby," she whispered, tears already streaming down her face. Jasmine stood frozen for a moment. Then, "Hi, Mom." They sat across from each other, Dr. Morrison present but silent, letting them navigate this reunion themselves. "You're so tall," Denise said, her voice breaking, "and beautiful. You look so much like your father, like Gerald. Grandma says I have his eyes." "You do. The same warm brown eyes that could always see right through me." Denise wiped her face with shaking hands. "Jasmine, I know sorry isn't enough. I know there aren't words for what I did, for how I failed you. But I need you to know, what happened wasn't your fault, not any of it. You were brave and good and right, and I was weak and selfish and wrong." Jasmine absorbed this, her face carefully neutral. "Why didn't you protect me? Why didn't you protect that girl in the basement?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Denise's face crumpled. "Because I was a coward. Because I was more afraid of being alone than I was committed to doing what was right. Because I had become so dependent on Marcus, so convinced that I couldn't survive without him, that I traded my soul for security." She leaned forward, desperate for Jasmine to understand. "But baby, that's my failure, my weakness. You did everything right, everything." They talked for an hour. Jasmine asked hard questions. Denise answered honestly, never making excuses, never shifting blame. I sat quietly in the corner, watching my daughter and granddaughter try to find some way forward. At the end, Jasmine stood. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet. I don't know if I ever will be. But I don't hate you. And maybe eventually we can figure out what kind of relationship we can have. A different relationship than before. But something." Denise nodded, more tears falling. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you, baby. Thank you for even giving me this chance." We left the office with no plans for future meetings, but with a door left slightly open. A possibility. A maybe. In the car, Jasmine was quiet for a long time. Then, "Grandma, do you think people can really change?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "I think people can learn from their mistakes. I think they can choose to be better. But I also think some damage can't be undone. You can heal from it. You can grow despite it. But you can't pretend it never happened." "Yeah," she said softly. "That makes sense." Now, as I write the final words of this story, Jasmine is 17. She's applying to colleges, thinking about art schools in California or New York. She still sees Dr. Morrison, though less frequently now. She still has complicated feelings about her mother, though they've had a few more supervised visits, slowly, carefully building something new from the ruins of what was. She's a survivor. More than that, she's thriving. And me? I'm 72 now. My knees hurt more than they used to, and I can't tend the garden as vigorously as I'd like. But I'm still here, still standing, still grateful for every morning I wake up with Jasmine under my roof. Was it worth it? Destroying my family? Turning in my own daughter? Upending all our lives? Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because Kayla Mitchell is alive. Because 4 other children were recovered and returned to their families. Because a trafficking network was dismantled. Because Jasmine learned that speaking truth matters, even when truth is painful. Because silence is never the answer. Comfort is never worth the cost of someone else's suffering. And family loyalty should never override basic human decency. These are the lessons I hope I've taught Jasmine. Not through words, but through action. Through being willing to lose everything to do what was right. And when I'm gone, when it's time to join Gerald, I'll go knowing that I made the choice that mattered. That when faced with an impossible decision, I chose the children who needed protecting over the daughter who had failed them. I chose courage over comfort. I chose truth over lies. I chose love, real love, the kind that protects the vulnerable and demands accountability, over the false love that enables evil through silence. If you're reading this or listening to this story and you recognize yourself in it, if you're the person who hears something wrong, who sees something suspicious, who knows in your gut that something terrible is happening, I'm begging you, speak up. Don't let fear silence you. Don't let family loyalty blind you. Don't let the desire for peace make you complicit in someone else's suffering. Believe the children who whisper their secrets. Investigate when something doesn't feel right. Act when action is needed. Yes, it might cost you everything. It cost me my daughter, my family as I knew it, my peace of mind. But it saved lives. And that's a trade I'd make again, without hesitation. The sun is setting now over Memphis, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Jasmine is in her room, probably video chatting with her friends or working on her college essays. In a few minutes, I'll call her down for dinner, and we'll sit at the kitchen table and talk about her day. These ordinary moments, these simple rituals of family life, are what I fought for, what I'm still fighting for. And they're enough, more than enough. They're everything.